Hello and welcome to the show. My guest today is the leader of the English Defense League, Stephen Lennon, or as he's more commonly known in the media, Tommy Robinson. Joining us too will be Mark Chamberlain, a fellow Brit that grew up in the United Arab Emirates under Islam and Sharia law. If you're not familiar with the EDL, it's a fast-growing grassroots protest movement in England that opposes the rapid spread of Islamism, Sharia law, and Islamic radicalism in England. Their primary form of protest are street-based marches. Islam is the fastest-growing religion in the world, and contrary to popular belief, it is not a religion of peace. My guests are here to speak firsthand about the counter effect of multiculturalism and why Sharia law cannot be assimilated into the law of the land and the adverse effects it's had all across Europe. If America doesn't enact laws that recognize Islam as a political philosophy and not a religion that's protected by the separation of church and state, and enact those laws now, we're sure to suffer a similar fate to what the European leaders are now regretting. Gentlemen, welcome to the show.
Hello. Thank you. Pleasure.
Tommy, let's start with you. Tell us, what is the EDL?
The EDL, we are a community. We're made up of all different walks of life. We formed just under 2 years ago. We formed due to an inability by our government to tackle Islamic extremism. Islamism is infiltrating government. It's pretty much out of control in this country. And everyone's been too scared to say anything due to political correctness and through fear of being branded a racist. And we formed to try and counter it and try and get our politicians to grow a backbone and oppose it and really stop the spread of it across our country, and which is what we've been doing basically for the last 2 years, is just raising awareness, holding street protests, building momentum, breaking the taboo that you can't say anything against Islam. Obviously, as you've just said, breaking the facade that Islam is a religion of peace, because our government, our media have all been shoving it down our throats for years now, for 10 to 15 years, we've had it put on us, and now we're speaking out, and the British public are speaking out, and they may have our politicians, they may have our police leaders fearful and intimidated by them, but the British public will never be fearful or intimidated, which is what we're doing now. We've formed a brother and sisterhood from one end of the country to the other. We've got divisions in every single city in this country, and this is the biggest phenomenon to ever sweep this country, and we're finally having our say and standing up and raising awareness and putting our message across the country that we're not having it anymore.
Tommy, tell us this. For the benefit of Americans who don't have firsthand experience with what life is like when Islam overtakes a community, and more importantly here, the real issue here is Sharia law, and we'll speak to that here as we go along. But tell our listeners what life is like and what can you expect when Islam does overtake a community and starts assimilating Sharia law. What happens?
It's devastating. It's scary, and you've got a reason to be scared. We've got Islamic pimping gangs prostituting our youth, and they've been doing this for 20 years. Systematic rape of our youth from one end of the country to the other. We have where I live locally in Luton, we've got 19 mosques. We've got 40 to 50,000 Muslims. They have their own sort of a Sharia police force, which is when they're jumping out of cars and attacking people not adhering to their law, which is basically walking down the street drunk, because they don't want that happening either. We've got a two-tier system running parallel with our government system, and then we have a master race, which is Islam, in this country, being treated like a master race, being protected like a master race, when quite frankly it's an ideology that's masquerading as a religion, and it's there to be, and people need to question it, and countries that can watch what's happened to England, look what's happened to France, look what's happened to Holland, wake up, because it's coming to your country. Wherever Islam goes, it's coming. If you give them an inch, they'll take a mile. You need to stop it in its track. You need to let them know that Sharia law is incompatible with our Western democracy and our freedoms due to their views on women, their views on infidels, which is us. And then we hear a lot of this multiculturalism has failed, and to be honest, all I see that as is more weak leadership by our president, because rather than isolating the core problem, the problem is not multiculturalism has failed, the problem is Islam has failed. Because Hindus, Sikhs, Jews, everybody else has come to this country, they've embraced it, we live side by side in happiness, in harmony, apart from Islam. So it's not multiculturalism, and they say that. They just need to say Islam's failed. The spread of Sharia is getting worse. We have over 100 Sharia law courts operating in this country. And it needs tackling, and we need strong leadership in this country. We need leaders, not appeasers. But hopefully you'll be able to wake everyone up in time in America so it doesn't get as bad as it's got here, because they've infiltrated government, and a lot of our politicians over here just go for the block vote. And because of the way Islam organises itself through its mosques, like the political wing of Islam, the community leaders or the politicians bow to them because they know automatically in one town they've got 40 to 50,000 guaranteed votes. So we're getting priced out of our community, bought out of our community. We're up against the best funded ideology the world's ever seen, and it's spreading through our country like a wildfire.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's really frightening because you guys are experiencing it. You know, it hasn't really infiltrated the United States as it has across the European continent. Obviously, there in the UK where you're located, but it's happening. It's happening.
And what's frightening and the worrying thing is when you look at the demographics, this is what people don't seem to realise. Within a generation, it will be there, because the Islamic demographics show in this country they're breeding 10 times faster than anybody else. So over 20 years, it's just been like a click of a finger, and it's just all of a sudden, whoa, what has happened? And then the next 20 to 30 years, we're going to be sitting there and people are burying their heads in their sand because people don't want to believe it's happening. And people are probably too scared to accept it's happening. And how can we stop it now when it's such a problem? And there's so many Islamist organisations, and they have infiltrated government. They run Tower Hamlets Council. The man in charge of £1 billion budget of our taxpayer money is an Islamist. And that's the biggest thing. What can we do? But all we're doing is waking the country up, arising, and saying we've had enough of it. We're living side by side with Islamists and terrorists. We're day in, day out, we're hearing about all the things they're planning to do and the atrocities. And it needs to stop. And it's worrying, and it's really worrying when you've got children. I've got 3 children. I'm petrified for my children's future growing up in the town I've grown up in, because it doesn't look good. And all that can really follow in the years to come, or if it's not dealt with, is mass civil disorder, a complete clash of cultures, because all that's going to ever face the implementation of Sharia law is a fierce opposition to it, which is people won't bow down to that. And it's fascist in every sense, and that's what we're seeing now. And we're branded as racist and fascist, and we're not racist and fascist at all. We get called Nazis, and Nazism and Islamism are opposite sides of the same coin. They're identical in their sense. They're both fascist ideologies, and just because one of them's hiding behind the name for religion, it's being allowed to flourish in this country, and everyone's too scared to say anything. But we're speaking up, and obviously we face the threats that come with that territory. Your life's in danger, and people want to kill, members of the Islamic community want to kill you, and we're constantly attacked when we go out on the streets. But the English motto always has and always will be not to surrender, and that's what we're not doing. We're not surrendering our kids' future in this country.
Amen, brother. Amen. Well, I'll tell you what, I, for one, tip my hat to you, and I give you major kudos for standing up and having the kahunas, to start a protest group, because you hit the nail on the head. The problem that we have today in today's society sounds like we have the same issues here in the States as you do over there in the UK, and that's political correctness. Political correctness is killing us. It's absolutely killing us, and it's giving, the green light to Islam and Sharia law. And you mentioned the demographics earlier, which you're absolutely correct, because Muslim birth rate now is 8 to 1. 8 to 1. We're actually within a generation of Islam dominating the entire earth, and with Islam comes Sharia law. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's the same way there in the UK, but in the United States here, until it affects an American directly and personally, they can have the neighbor on their left be beheaded, and the neighbor on their right have a daughter raped 3 times, and both times be by radical Islam group. But if it doesn't affect their front doorstep, they just turn the other cheek. And part of the problem is that very issue, multiculturalism and political correctness, because nowadays when you stand up and speak out against what's wrong, you're constantly labeled a racist or a bigot or something else, and it's got us tongue tied, and I for one greatly appreciate the grassroots level movement, that's going on over there in the UK. My question is, do you have a chapter? Have you got an organization here in the United States that's an extension of the EDL?
There is an American Defence League. I believe Pamela Geller's organisation is similar in the sense, but there has been defence leagues that propped up all over Europe. We're in constant contact. We're actually going out to Sweden to a Swedish Defence League demonstration in May. So all of Europe's lighting up now. We've got a French Defence League, a German Defence League, but I have seen an American Defence League. The only problem we have with America is it's such a big place. In England, no matter where a demonstration is, every one of us can travel to it. 4 or 5 hour drive. But I think that every single country will form a defence league when they see what's happening. They see the phenomenon that's been, because together, it's united we stand, divided we fall, and that is what it is. So we've got united this country like it's never been united before. And as you said, Pete, we were scared. We were scared to speak out, and we've been walking on eggshells for 15 years. But now that we've spoke out, we've broke that barrier of being called racist. At first, people shy away once they're called a racist. If they want to call us racist, we'll have it tattooed on our heads, because what is racist about standing up for our children's future? What's racist about opposing Sharia law? What's racist against protecting women's rights? There's nothing racist about our organisation in any way, and quite frankly, everyone can see through it now. We've been labelled in the media, but people are seeing straight through it. They're seeing this organisation for what it is, which is the last stand and the last chance that England's got is the people speaking, rather than our politicians who are in bed with Islam and who have been bought by the petrol dollar. And as I said, you can buy our politicians, but there's no price you can put on a man's love for his country or a man's love for his children. And that's what we're trying to protect. So there's no price they can buy us with. And I think America will form a defence league. People hearing this will form their own defence league, and anything that's going on locally, I think to the Tea Party seems to be a similar grassroots organisation. Anything that affects you locally to do with Islam, get out on the street. Get out on the street and have your voices heard. And that's what we're doing. Everything and anything. We're telling them, no, we're not happy about that. And whereas we've been ignored for years, they're having to listen now.
Good for you. Good for you. And and I certainly hope we start seeing the exact same movement, because I was going to bring that up, the fact that over here we have the Tea Party movement, because we finally had enough people pissed off, both parties, and pissed off at the debt crisis that we're facing here in the U.S. But when I go by a mosque or ever pass a mosque, I never see protesters. I never see anybody stepping up to the plate other than just through media, people like myself on a radio show. I blog about Islam and Sharia law, but we're not seeing the grassroots level movement in the streets like what you guys are doing over there.
Yeah,
in the UK.
Once people do, this has been a phenomenon. And the reason why it's been a phenomenon is because everyone in those towns and cities with those Islamic ghettos has been feeling it, which will be the same in America. People living near it knows how it affects them. And as you said, people who don't live there, they don't realise it. So our politicians who are living in their big country houses behind their big metal fences and gates, they don't understand what we're talking about. So we're bringing it to the forefront. We're telling them in our streets, we're getting thousands upon thousands now travelling to every demonstration. I think there are about 7,000 or 8,000 marching through Luton last month. There's demonstrations going on every few in different regions. We've built regional organisers. We're becoming more organised. Obviously, we're just normal people. That's the point. Is we're normal people. We're not educated people. We're normal people from working class estates who it's affecting. And it's been thrust upon us. We've had to do this, and now we've done it. We're getting more mature as an organisation. We're getting more organised, and we're making links across not just Europe but also in America, throughout the world, in order to form a united Western front against militant Islam, against the spread of Sharia law, which is what we're doing. And we're just doing what we can. So,
you know what this is? This is your 3T moment.
Yep.
You know what that means, 3T?
No, what's that mean?
That's my term for titanium testicle territory, brother. You're in it.
You're going to need
it.
That's the thing. This is our moment. That's why I keep saying every time I do a speech, I say, this is our time. And it is our time. It's our time to stand up and say we'll be free men and women staying forever in our country, and that's what we're standing up for. And that's what you're seeing. This is our time, because it's been Islam's time in this country for 15 to 20 years. They've had their marches. They've obliterated this country. They've took liberties from one end of this country to the other. Now's our time. Now's the English people's time. It's the British people's time, and we're standing up and we're doing it exactly how we want to do it. So.
Well, look at Merkel. Look at Merkel, Sarkozy, and who's the guy? The Denmark leader. What's his name that speaks out?
Oh, who does?
I think it's Denmark. The blonde-headed leader of Denmark.
Geert Wilders from Holland.
Holland, yeah. Geert Wilders.
Holland. What's his name?
Geert Wilders.
Geert Wilders.
Gert.
Yeah.
I can say it one more time.
Gert. G-E-E-R-T. Geert Wilders. Wilders.
That's it. Yeah. You know, more power to him, because I know he's been bringing this to the forefront as well, and he's been taking a lot of heat for that. And what I want to do now is ask Mark to give us an idea. Mark, understand that you grew up in the United Arab Emirates, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
So you grew up under Sharia law.
Yeah, yes, I did. I suppose United Arab Emirates being a Gulf state, the whole region is Islamic, and it's
give us an understanding, Mark. Give us an understanding of what it was like growing up, in an Islamic state as a Brit, going over there as a young boy and growing up under that type of system. What are some of the things that you notice? What are the effects of being in this case, a kafir, since you're not a Muslim? What is it like to be in that position, or what are some of the very personal things that you have to contend with and deal with under that structure?
It's I suppose, just to paint a little bit of a picture. I was 14 when I first moved to the Middle East, and I come from quite a rural area in a beautiful county of Shropshire in England. And I travelled most of my life with my parents anyway. I was very lucky that my parents travelled with work and whatnot. And my dad had got work over in the Middle East, and we moved over in 1978 to United Arab Emirates, which was, I suppose Abu Dhabi and Dubai were sort of more like fishing villages, just growing out of the sand at the time. They weren't really big cities at that time. They were just growing. But the biggest impact that Islam had on my life was literally the very first day that I attended school. My mother was a teacher, and she taught at the American school in Abu Dhabi in United Arab Emirates. So, and then I attended what was called like an international school, where different children from all different backgrounds in different countries around the world would attend. And the first day of school, it was sort of 8 a.m., and the class teacher had sort of quieted the class, and he sort of made an announcement that the headmaster's, the deputy headmaster was going to enter the class and give a speech, first day of school, this sort of thing. I thought, oh, fantastic, great. But when the deputy headmaster came into the class, he came in with 2 armed soldiers with assault rifles and stood at the front of the classroom, which was quite shocking as a 14-year-old just come from England, and obviously it was a bit of a culture shock at the very beginning anyway, but to have this sort of experience happen. Anyway, he made a quick speech, but what he did, he asked us to put our textbooks onto the desk in front of us, and literally I'd just been shopping for these textbooks that previous weekend with my mother, and I remember her saying that how expensive the books were, and anyway, put the books on the table. We had to then put our hands with the palms facing upwards on the table either side of the books. And he went to each pupil and tore the pages, certain pages from each book. I think there's about 9 textbooks. He knew exactly which page to take out and to destroy. And he left, and obviously, there's a lot of chatter in the class, and all the kids are talking, and what the hell's going on, And I was lucky enough, I got my hand raised, and the teacher said yes, So, I asked the question everybody wanted to ask, well, what the hell's going on, And he said, well, the pages that he removed have a reference to Christians and Jews and their associated faiths. And under the strict censorship laws and Sharia law, you're not even allowed to have that type of material in the country, never mind in the school curriculum. So it was removed. And I said, well, how are we supposed to know the truth? And the teacher said, no, that's a good question, son. He said, you won't hear. You won't hear. So from that day, I was 14, coming 15, and from that day, that was it. I started to study Islam. I wanted to know exactly what the hell was going on.
Yeah. Speak to the atrocities that oftentimes, the women, what they're subjected to. I've heard horror stories about horror stories about some of the cabbies over there and people being attacked. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, yeah, I suppose it's gone on for centuries. I mean, when I first started to study Islam way back as a sort of 15-year-old, I was sort of taking an anthropology class, so I sort of turned the study towards Arabian Peninsula life, tribal practices, how they traded with each other, how Islam impacted on their communities, and this sort of thing. So of course it takes you right back to the days of Muhammad, and some people aren't going to agree with me, but Muhammad was a rapist. Muhammad was a pedophile. Muhammad was a murderer. Muhammad did slaughter hundreds and hundreds of people, if not into the thousands.
Well, that's historical. I don't see why anybody would disagree with it, because that's documented. That's historical.
Well, if we see this is the big problem. I've grown up with Islam. I've lived predominantly most of my life in the Middle East. The last 33 years, I've lived in every Gulf state: Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, Iraq on many, many occasions, right across Jordan, Egypt, Tunisia. I've lived in most of Lebanon. I was on one of the last civilian planes out of Lebanon in 81. I was 16, nearly 17. The place was leveled, absolutely smashed. So I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of troubles, a lot of war. Even from the age of 15 and 16, I was living there when the Iranian Revolution was going on with the American hostage situation, the start of the Iran-Iraq War, Sunni Shia. It's very volatile, and you have to go back. You have to study hard, and you have to find the root causes to all of this. This red hot, bloodthirsting. Where does this all come from? And it has to come from the one thing that they regard as the man that sits at the right hand of Allah, and that is Muhammad. Mm-hmm. If he is conducting and waging war, and after he's slaughtered all of the menfolk, that he then takes the women folk and distributes those women to the Muslim soldiers and the Muslim armies as what he would call as war booty. And this is legitimate within Islam. They are the women folk of the non-believer. They're the women folk of the kafir. So they're legitimate to the Muslim to take. And basically, they were used as for sex. Really, they were sex slaves, and that's what it was all about. Because you go back to this time, and there is I'm not sure if it's a well-known story, but there's a story in the life of Muhammad which is called a hadith. That's the name of it. A story where the Muslims approached Muhammad and asked him about, look, thank you very much for these slave women. We've been having sex with them. We're raping them. But we're practicing coitus interruptus, which is a withdrawal sexual method. And Muhammad said, well, I'm very surprised you're even using that method. What will be, what will be, what Allah allows, I suppose. And they said, well, we don't want to get these women pregnant because they're not going to fetch as much money at market. So straight away from this story, you can see that Muhammad is condoning rape and also, the selling of the slave women actually funded jihad. It's all very fundamental. It's all very linked within the Islamic faith and the doctrine. And this is where it stems from.
Sorry, I was just saying, I think if people drew the dot to dots from attacks on Muslims against non-Muslims for the rape of non-Muslim girls by Muslims across England and across Britain, they would realise they've already launched a jihad in this country. Because it is the amount of attacks, the amount of religiously motivated attacks by Muslim gangs, the paedophilic rape of our youth, of our girls, which seems to be an epidemic across the north of this country, we'd realise they've already launched it in certain ways already. And that's what we're seeing, as Mark's explained there, I don't know the in-depths of Islam or the Quran inside out, but I just know what I've seen growing up. And the whole time through growing up, I sat and thought, where does this hostility come from? Where does this extra level of violence, and they're just like a different breed in every sense than we are. Completely different. I've always wondered where it comes from. And then the more I've seen undercover documentaries of the mosques, what they're teaching of the Islamic schools, there it is. It's the teachings of Islam. That's what's doing it. And until people tackle that, and until people are brave enough to confront and say that it needs reforming and confront Iran, then we'll continue to have this problem. It will still be here for years to come in this country.
And one of the reasons why you're experiencing, or Britain's experiencing...
We're going to go to a short commercial break here, and when we come back, what I'd like for you to do is talk about how Islam, and specifically Sharia law, how they use the peaceful means to begin to infiltrate, a particular community. As you just said, they're conducting jihad, but they're not using terrorism to do it. I want to talk about that other side when we come back from this commercial break. I'm Kevin Lehman. You're listening to Catch Kevin Uncensored, Unscripted. We're talking with Mark Chamberlain and Tommy Robinson. We're going to go to a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay, we are back with our guests, Tommy Robinson and Mark Chamberlain. Gentlemen, before we went to the break, Tommy, I wanted to ask you if you could explain to us, since you witnessed this firsthand over in the UK, and this is something I think that's very important for Americans to understand, and that is the silent side of Sharia law and how jihad is being waged not only through terrorism as a mechanism, but also through peaceful assimilation. Could you speak to how that comes about, and what are some of the, subversive tactics that Sharia law and Islam uses to really begin to assimilate and completely, eventually dominate a community?
Yeah, the biggest tactic they use is the cry of persecution. That's what I see. They always cry persecution, where they're the ones that are doing the persecuting, where they always cry that they're the victim. But one video that I watched that really woke me up in Britain was a video by a man called Shalid Malik, which was the first Muslim minister to the Labour government. He sat down he was on the right hand side of our Prime Minister, and in this video, he's addressing about 1,000 Muslims, and it's supposedly completely moderate Muslims. And in it, he says, in 2001, we had 1 Muslim MP. In 2003, we had 3 Muslim MPs. In 2005, we had 6 Muslim MPs. In 2008, we had 8 Muslim MPs. And in between saying each of these things, he says, Inshallah, which is Allah willing. And then he says, within 10 years, in this Parliament, the British Parliament, every MP will be Muslim. And he says, within 20 years, in this country, the Prime Minister will share our faith. And so he's basically saying Allah is willing them to infiltrate our government and take our government, which is what he's saying. Now, the problem is, to most of us, it doesn't matter what religion our MP is, but it's the only thing that matters to them. The only thing. The only person they would ever vote for. We've even seen in this country certain political parties, Conservative Party, when it went out for the postal vote, they changed the name. So say the man's name was Paul Smith, they changed it to Imran Khan when it went out in the postal vote to the Muslim area, because they knew they'd all just tick the box for a Muslim, because that's all they do. And we've seen it. We've seen what they're saying. It's infiltrated the Tower Hamlets Council. It's the political wing of Islam. So the ones not to worry about are the ones that, like the people standing on the street corners and shouting, "We're going to get Sharia law in your country." They're not the ones that scare me. It's the ones that are doing it silently, as you said, working 7 days a week in order to further Islam in this country, in order to completely change the whole face of this country to an Islamic one in a slow process. It's not going to happen overnight. It'll happen over 20 years, which is what we're seeing in certain areas. They've done it.
It's already deep inside America.
Yeah, it's already deep inside.
Very deep. Very deep. It's it's widespread in America as well. The problem is absolutely widespread. It's just that because, like you mentioned earlier, Tommy, that America is such a big nation. I spent most of 2008 on the coast of California. Everybody surrounding me was a Democrat, to be honest. And with the greatest respect to America and Americans, but the majority of the people that were surrounding me really hadn't got a clue what was going on outside of their front door, unless it had something to do with work or maybe school and the children, which is, hey, that's life, that's life. But they had no idea about what was going on with the war in Afghanistan. Absolutely no idea about the war in Iraq. No idea about Islam, and this was in 2008 when Obama was running up for his presidency. So obviously you're digging around. I was trying to drop a few hints, and trying to say, well, look, you've got to look at this, but not really. You can bang your head against a brick wall as much as you want. Some people just won't listen to it, so you leave it. But you look at people, you look at cases like the Holy Land Foundation case in Texas, and then the unindicted co-conspirators that are involved in that case. It'll show you how widespread the problem is in America. You're talking about this type of threat is deep straight into Congress, straight in at the deep end, right in as far as Obama.
Yeah. And the thing is, for a lot of people don't want to believe it because it's that terrifying.
Yeah, because they have to make a decision, and they're scared by that decision. When they're confronted with the whole shock of it, they go, "Oh my God!" and they run the other direction because they don't want to talk about it. They don't want to confront it because if they do, they know they're going to make a choice. And they're scared of that choice because that choice is exactly like Britain. It could end up in civil war.
And that's the only choice. And then, as I said, people are prepared and have been prepared and always will be prepared to die for their freedoms. And that's what they're seeing. People will stand up and fight for their freedoms. And we will never give away our freedoms. And Sharia law will take every single one of them. And
I'll show you Sharia law. A very interesting point was Obama's speech in Cairo. And it just maybe a lot of the listeners won't understand. A part of Sharia is called zakat. And it's like a payment that Muslims make into charity, this sort of thing, But 1/8 of zakat must be paid to jihad. And when Obama stood in Cairo, he invited the Muslim Brotherhood to the seminar, to the conference, who at that time were a banned Islamist organization in Egypt. They're not even allowed to be a political party at that time. He invited them. He stands in front of the whole crowd and then turns around and says, "I will do everything in my power to assist American Muslims to pay zakat," knowing full well that 1/8 of zakat goes towards jihad. That tells me everything. That tells me how big the threat is in America.
Yeah, don't get me started on Obama and his so-called Christian beliefs. That's a whole nother show. Every action that man takes speaks to the truth of his beliefs and who his allegiance is to. But that's for another time. Is it possible to be a good Muslim or to be a good Briton, a good Brit if you're a Muslim? Is that even possible? And are there any moderate Muslims that are speaking up and standing against the radicalism that's taking place over in your backyard right now?
Oh, yes, there is. Yeah, of course.
There are moderate Muslims, but there's not moderate Islam. So there are moderate Muslims, but there's not moderate Islam. And quite frankly, their silence is deafening because they're not doing anything about it. I keep asking, well, why don't they get out on the streets? Why don't they oppose these radicals? They won't. They might come and sit on the TV and say, well, they don't speak for us. Well, I'm sorry, that's not good enough. That's not good enough. We've got to see action, and the non-action that we're seeing is it's hard not to tie you all with the same brush. Because I personally have grown, and I'm actually great Muslims. But if anyone who follows that book to the word in a 7th century form is going to be evil, and that's what we're seeing. And it's not
you can defeat it. You can fight all the wars across the world and as many bombs and bullets and loss of life, bloodshed, chaos. Never going to defeat Islam. There's only one way to defeat Islam, and that is exactly to fight it the way that Tommy has mentioned earlier. It's a political ideology. It's not a faith, and it's not a religion. When people say, "Oh, it's not a religion of peace," it's not a religion.
It's not. And
it's simply a political ideology. The same as
I say to them, can you say what the word Islam translated means? And you know, every one of them believes it means peace. And I started laughing my head off because I said, it actually means submission. It actually means surrender to Allah. And somehow we've all been brainwashed that it means peace. And it doesn't. And that's part of the way they win the war, is through the propaganda against it. And the facade that it's a religion of peace. And it's not. And it never has been. So people need to start realising that. Everywhere it goes, it's like, if you go to Holland, where Gert Wilders is from, it's the Moroccans. If you go to France, it's the Algerians. If you go to Australia, it's the Lebanese. If you go to Sweden, it's the Iraqis. If you go to England, it's the Pakistanis that are causing mayhem, that are raping, that are butchering, that are murdering, are planning atrocities. And what's the link between all of them? They follow Islam. That's it. It all comes back to Islam. And people need to wake up and stand up now before it's too late for their children's future. And to be honest, I think that although it is probably deep-rooted in America, it may not be as big as a problem it is in Britain. And I wish now that I was around 20 years ago, or people were around 20 years ago, to form this defence against it now. Stop it now. Because speaking of now, where is now? Where's the National Organization of Women? Where is the ACLU? Well, why aren't they standing up fighting against all the abuse that the women take? And we know that in Islam the women are completely abused. How come, in your opinion, gentlemen, why is not the ACLU and the National Organization of Women, for example, speaking out and coming against Islam? Because they're petrified. If I just tell you, I've had threats to decapitate my children. I've had 24-hour-day police guard outside my house for 10 days. I have to walk around in a bulletproof vest. I've been attacked. People jump out of the car with knives. That is what goes with the territory of opposing it. So that is where they are. They're all still in their houses, having a happy night. They haven't got fireproof letterboxes like I have. They haven't got break-proof windows, and they don't have to look over their shoulder every time they leave their house. And they don't want that. And that's what comes with opposing it. So that's where they are. They're all petrified. And that's what it is. Everyone knows whoever comes out and takes this stance and says it how it is, you're going to be a target. And that's it. We've seen Van Gogh, we've seen Salman Rushdie, it's the territory that comes with it. The Danish cartoonist, anyone that says it, anyone that speaks out against it. So, to be honest, I don't blame the women groups. I don't blame them for being scared. A lot of people are scared by the threats, and Islam rules with fear and intimidation. That's how it rules. That's how it wins. That's how it's getting so powerful, because everyone's been scared and fearful to say anything. Our government, we better not upset the Islamic community in case they go mad, in case they riot, in case they get offended. And all we ever hear about is in case we offend them. We're offended on a daily basis by Islam. Every single day it's offending us. But no one cares about whether we're offended, because we're not going to riot. We're not going to blow things up. We're not going to start murdering people. That's why they've been winning it, and that's why all these women's rights groups and all these different organisations are just silent on the issue. Even animal rights organisations with the complete spread of halal. You've got major institutions in Britain feeding halal. I think even the House of Commons was giving halal and not telling people it's halal. Supermarket selling it. It doesn't even say it's halal meat. If I go into my local town centre, pretty much every single place you can eat is halal meat. Allah's meat. That's killed in a way and slit the throat, let it bleed for 15 minutes, and then give an Islamic ritual and a prayer over the food. I'm a Christian. I don't want to eat halal meat. Well, where's my option? Where's my rights? And animal rights groups are even too scared to say anything. Everyone's too scared to say anything. But that's the taboo we're trying to break. When we formed, we said we need to break political correctness. We need to break a two-tier policing system, because our community's policed with iron fists and their community's policed with kid gloves because they're scared of them. We need to break a two-tier funding system that has seen the Islamic communities overfunded in comparison to our communities. And all we want is the rule of law to be implemented equally. We don't want favouritism. We don't want to be treated more favourably. We want equal rights. That's what we're fighting for now, is equal rights in our own country. And that's why I think most of these groups, the bigger the voice gets, the bigger the English Defence League get in this country, the more groups like that, I believe, will give inspiration and will give courage to them. It's okay, stand up and say it. Because that's the lead. We'll lead it and people will follow. And that's what we're seeing in this country. A lot of people now, politicians are saying things that they wouldn't have dreamt of saying 2 years ago. certain things coming out, documentaries like there was documentaries they tried to screen in this country 7-8 years ago, and they were blocked. They were blocked by the government. They were blocked by the police. They wouldn't let them be shown because of the threat of what the Islamic community would do. Now they're showing them. Now they're showing what's going on in these Islamic schools because they know that the public is there. Because the English Defence League is the voice of the British people. That's who we are. We're the common sense voice, and we're speaking on behalf of millions and millions and millions of people who have been oppressed and want change.
Well, gentlemen, we've got about 5 minutes left, so and a couple more questions. Before I ask you another question, do me a favor. For people in America that want to get engaged, that want to become empowered and fight against the spread of Islam and Sharia law, is there a website that you suggest or recommend, or is there a contact person? How can they get more information if they want to get engaged in this fight?
Daniel Pipes.
Yeah, Daniel, I'll say more engaged. Like, we've got our website, but Pamela Geller at Atlas Shrugs, but literally, you can copy what has happened in this country, which all it started was with 30 or 40 of us went out onto the streets, we made our placard that said English, we made our tops exactly the same, and we went and confronted the local Islamic jihadists or extremists. So if there's a rally somewhere for Sharia law, just set up a date. That's all it needs is someone to put the date out, and people will come, and people will follow. And that's it. Get out on the streets. It will hit the media. Once it hits the media, you'll have a network building like we've built. There is already an American Defence League. Go look it up on Facebook. People have already been networking for the last 18 months and talking and trying to get together and build a brother and sisterhood that are prepared to take to the streets. And that's what they can do. They can go on our website, www.english.
Well, I take it this show's being broadcasted from Florida. Is that correct?
Actually, it's international, so it doesn't really matter.
Oh, right. Well, you've got Sharia law. You've just had a recent case in Florida. I think a judge decided on a legal case and said, "Oh, right, I'm not going to pass judgment on it. It's going to be dealt with under Sharia law."
Under Sharia law, Hillsborough County, it sure did.
Well, you see, Sharia law is basically the heart of Islam. Because it's a political ideology, that's the heart of it. So if you don't need to fight it with wars and bullets. You can defeat Islam by outlawing Sharia law. If you outlaw it and you criminalize anybody that calls for it, and possibly even an act of treason, because it's like overthrowing the government, it's like trying to replace your judicial system with their judicial system, and it's political. You outlaw it, and if somebody starts calling for it on the streets, they're arrested. They're locked up. That's the only way you're going to do it. You have to outlaw Sharia.
But that's what we're trying to do in this country. We're trying to build such a bit, become such an organisation and such a powerful strength from the streets that our politicians will take that stance. But we feel that we need to wake them up. We need to spread our message. We need to keep taking to the streets. And then sooner or later, once they see how powerful we are, how big we are, they'll want to appease us the same way they want to appease Islam. So,
my fear here in the United States, as you gentlemen very well know, the United States is predominantly a Christian nation, and I brought this up several weeks ago. I had a guest on my show, a Christian apologist, and the problem I see here in the United States with regards to the organized religion, first of all, we're down to I've got about maybe 4 minutes. I just want to make this point and see if you agree with me on this, and that's the fact that here in the United States, there's such an ecumenical convergence of various faiths, not just interdenominational within the Christian faith, but there's a lot of organizations that are calling for ecumenism amongst all world faiths, and I've even been seeing, believe it or not, Christian churches, which I am not a fan of. I'm a believer, I'm a Christian, but I do not stand for organized religion or corporate Christendom. But nonetheless, I see what's going on here, and there's a lot of Christian churches that are now, coming together with some Islamic believers and even renting their churches out to Muslims, and that's a major problem because that tells me that even the Christian...
That's a sellout to Christianity as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, that is. Let me finish the thought real quick. That is a sellout. And the other problem we have with and why I'm not seeing a lot of active participation and protests like what you gentlemen are doing over there is the fact that a lot of these churches are promoting the fact that Jesus Christ is about to return and he's going to take care of this. What do you say to that?
I say they need to get with it and start understanding Islam before they open their doors to it, because Islam will wipe Christianity out at the click of its fingers if it had a chance.
It sure will.
There's a famous saying in the Middle East.
I don't know if this is the predominant belief of Christians over in the UK, but the predominant belief of Christians here in the United States is, in terms of their eschatological, their Bible prophecy viewpoint, is what we call a dispensational premillennial viewpoint, and that's the fact that they believe that we're at the end of the world anyhow. And so my fear is that a lot of Christians will not engage in this battle because they claim that it is a spiritual battle, one that inevitably is going to be won by the return of Jesus Christ. Of course, I try to educate them and say, by the way, Christ returned exactly when he said he would, in spirit and power form, back in the first century. So guess what? There is not going to be any beam me up, Scotty. Into
even if there was going to be a beam me up, Scotty, does that mean we must live in these terrible conditions oppressed by Islam until that?
Yeah.
That. Even if they do believe it, they must realise that it is better to live as free people. It's better not to live under oppression. It is better to live a good life. And everything that Christianity stands for, Islam stands against.
But Islam is waiting. Islam has an equivalent to the return of Jesus, which is their equivalent is called the Mahdi. They're waiting for the return of the Mahdi. And in the Quran and under the Islamic faith, it says that the Mahdi will return in the last days, very similar to the Bible, the last days, the end of days, apocalypse, 4 horses, all that sort of thing. But in the last days for Muslims, that day will come when they fight the Jews. And they believe that the creation of Israel is actually part of what Islam preaches, is because Islam is saying that, Israel has been created, that we've gathered all the Jews in one place ready for that slaughter. And there's a famous saying in the Middle East that says, first comes Saturday, then comes Sunday. Saturday meaning first comes the Jews, Sunday comes the Christians.
Well, gentlemen, we are at the end of our time. This has gone way too fast because this is a fascinating subject and a very critical one, but I greatly appreciate you're taking time out of your schedule, both Tommy and Mark. And Tommy, my hat's off to you. More power to you, brother. You have titanium testicles. You're in your 3T moment, and I'm a big fan. So, gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing the information with us, and feel free to keep us updated and let us know how you're making progress over there, and let us know if there's any inroads here in the United States. Contact me directly so that I can pass the information on through my website at catchkevin.com.
Thank you.
So, this is Kevin Lehmann.
Hey,
Kevin Lehmann on behalf
of... No surrender, America.
Thank you, gentlemen.